Welcome to the Federal Leadership and Professional Development Seminar Series. We've actually been in operation for a little bit over a year, and this is our 10th seminar. It's a little disclaimer that no statement in the seminar should be construed as an official position of AHRQ, HHS, or any other federal agency. The goals of the seminar series are threefold: to share federal leader expertise and lessons learned, to provide free training, as training resources are always limited, and bring individuals together and foster intra and interagency connections, collaborations, and sharing. So on the listserv right now, we have over 3,000 subscribers, so it really is spreading, and we found that people really do appreciate having federal leaders teach about federal leadership and professional development in the government. So for the folks in the room, you all have a leaf. We have a 7-foot tall tree with our leaves with lessons learned from folks who have attended in person. For you on the line, you will get a survey afterwards, and if you could please input your biggest lesson learned and also what you plan on doing with your lessons that you've learned. Our next seminar is coming up in December, on December 14th. We're going to have a seminar on Lean Six Sigma and theory of constraints. The registration for that seminar will open up in December. And just a bit of information for contact, how to sign up for the listserv, and then where to find the past recordings of seminars that have occurred since February. So today's speaker, David Rosenmarkle. So Dave recently retired from federal service as program manager and advisor to the Department of Energy senior agency leadership in the following areas. There's a long list here: executive learning and development programs, employee engagement, leadership 360 assessments, the senior executive service or SES candidate development program, executive coaching, onboarding for new SES employees, and succession planning. He also served as a creator and program manager for the DOE Learning Circles for Women Leaders, and the program manager for the Executive Learning Series events, SES Networking, and Executive Forum events. Dave worked in human resource and development for many years. At the Internal Revenue Service, Dave served in a series of HR management positions, culminating in a national leadership role in taxpayer service training and public education. In private industry, Dave established his own consulting firm and provided organization development and executive leadership training to an array of clients, including Fannie Mae, Marriott, and others. After concluding graduate work at American University in organization development and process consultation, Dave went on to teach management development and communication skills at American University for 4 years. As a result of his leadership development work in private industry and at American University, Dave was invited to travel to the United Nations Southeast Asia Regional Office on 3 occasions to provide leadership training and team building assistance to geopolitically diverse diplomatic managers and employees. Dave has been recognized for his work in HR development over his career with numerous awards. Occasionally, Dave has been characterized as a chronic volunteer, and in 1996, Dave was selected as a community hero by United Way of America. He was also invited to carry the Olympic torch in the '96 and 2002 World Olympics in recognition of his volunteer efforts. Dave is a veteran of the U.S. Navy, where he served as an air traffic controller. Dave is married, has 3 children, and lives with his wife in Annandale, Virginia. Please welcome Dave.
Has anybody here had time to look at the slides ahead of time? Okay, some have, some haven't. And one of the things I say at the end is that ultimately, getting to the SES is a melding of excellence in performance, results, and relationships. And if you are lagging in any of the 3, there's a good chance you won't get selected or appointed to an SES position. It's not just being the best technician in the world or the best first supervisor in the world. It's how you cultivate relationships, how you demonstrate results, and how you're evaluated in your performance. All right, so I want to go through the agenda. I don't know if anybody noticed the picture across the top in the word in front of the picture. That's what happens. Okay, the part of the process to get you to the best qualified list, that's supposed to be merit-based, but ultimately what happens in most instances is that the selecting official makes that choice, and what you've done to get in front of that selecting official prior to that decision is going to impact what you're able to do. So this afternoon, quickly, we are going to cover career challenges, creating career partnerships, devising a high-impact development plan, and then the fun part for me is the 10 reasons that people don't get selected for SES positions. The 10 top reasons emanated from a survey that we took several years ago among 750 SES. And he said, we'd like to know before we have this seminar why you don't pick people. And so we're going to go through that in the second half of the presentation, and we're going to talk about strategies that will help you address, overcome, or just plot forward in your consideration to be selected. Okay. The competition. I don't know if you had any idea there are that many people out there who could apply for an SES position, but the GS-14s, 15s, and then a very capable contingent of retired military officers are also there, 30 to 40,000 at any point in time that who could apply for an SES position. And the advantage that the military officers have, and we have in DOE, I think 40% are veterans, okay? And the advantage they have is that the Defense Department has the best management, leadership, executive training in the world, okay? They invest in all of their leaders to make them strong and to make them capable. So when you're competing against that, it makes it a challenge. And in my years of federal service, I networked across many different federal agencies and tried to steal good ideas wherever I could from organizations. And, well, how do you prepare your employees to compete or to become executives? And no agency did it the same. Okay, everybody has a different interest, has a different level of funding, which is key, or maybe they just don't want to do it. And OPM, to their credit, has over the years tried to develop guidelines, and they approve SES CDPs, and they say, here's what you need to do for leadership development in your agency. But it really kind of falls to the senior leader at the agency, the secretary, as to how much emphasis is going to be put on it. And in many instances, not much, because that secretary has a lot of other fish to fly in mission and responsibility getting the work done. So executive development, it's going to vary. Like I said, the Department of Defense is excellent. As far as, and we'll get into a little more detail later, but on SES CDPs, some of the front runners who do a really good job with it are Internal Revenue, Social Security, USDA, and I know HUD runs a lot, or not HUD, DHS runs a lot of them, but I don't know what their conversion rate is like. With Internal Revenue and Social Security, the candidates who are selected to participate in the CDP are selected into the program. They no longer stay in their former position, whether it's with another agency or within Internal Revenue. They are slotted into the program, and they are there for 1 to 2 years. And when they finish the CDP, they are then posted to an Assistant 2 position as an executive, pending appointment to an appropriate position. So that's all in for that agency. Social Security does the same thing, okay? Most of the other CDPs, it's a part-time. And so you're expected to do all the CDP requirements, but also do your job. And that can work against you, but I'll get to that later. Next slide, please. When we leave today, and again, I'll try not to speed talk, but this is what I hope you're going to be thinking about as you plan your strategies in terms of the objectives and goals that you set. Because if you don't do this in detail, it's not going to happen. Okay, next slide. So, for career candidates, identify your interim and long-term aspirations. This is crucial because it's really your next step. Okay, most of the time you can't go from a first-line supervisory position to an executive position unless you've had other experiences somewhere else. Okay, so that interim step could be a next level up management position, could be a lateral, into a new area that's going to broaden your base to be competitive. But you have to look at both the interim and the long term. And then preparing for high impact interactions. What you have done to date is a result of what you know. In order to get selected into an executive position, it's going to be who knows you. Okay, that's how it happens. Executives, senior selecting officials are not going to select people they don't know or are not familiar with. And so we'll come back to the importance of what you're going to be doing with your career partners, which is something we'll talk about in another slide. But when you're developing your impact plan, you know, a lot of people do the window dressing, but they don't fill in the menu. Okay, in other words, oh yeah, I have an IDP. Okay, but is it substance? You know, is it stretching? Does it take you out of your comfort zone? And you know, part of the feedback that you're going to gather from your career partners, who we'll talk about in a little bit, is where are the gaps? Does anybody know what a force field analysis is? I see a couple heads nodding. Okay, well, you know, there are driving and restraining forces. And could you go to the very last slide? I wasn't sure where I was going to put this in, but as an aspiring executive, you're going to need help in identifying forces that are propelling you to an executive promotion, your strengths as a leader, your strengths in terms of your technical background, your strengths in your communication skills, and you're going to want to build on those. You also have restraining forces, which could be a lack of supervisory experience, could be a lack of getting to know enough people to spread the word that you're a good person to work for. And the purpose of a force field analysis is you want to lessen the impact of the restraining forces. And so you identify things that you do that are going to make them have less impact on your ability to be promoted. The same thing on the driving forces, that's where you're going to leverage your strengths and you're going to continue to build on. Don't stop when you, oh, I've got there, I've done that. Okay, well, then it's time to build on that, okay, and keep building that strength because that could be very prominent when you're being considered for any future level promotion. Did you know that in a survey that was taken by the Corporate Executive Board that fewer than 29% of employees know about other opportunities in other parts of their own organization? You know, that they are not aware that there are other roles that they could play and assume in preparation for broadening their experience and making them more competitive. And so part of your working with your mentors, managers, career partners is to find out about those other opportunities so that you can put them in your IDP and start making a plan to get there. Next. So, who are your high-impact career partners? Hopefully your manager or your direct supervisor is somebody that is supporting your interests and efforts. Unfortunately, I've known managers who don't want to lose the person in the top drawer and may or may not support your efforts. And you've got to get clear on that. Are you being supported? Executives, mentors, and organization leaders. This comes back to what I'm asking you to do is to build a robust network, because there is where a lot of your advocacy is going to come from. You need people who will be interested to advocate on your behalf. And so you'll need to determine ways that you can meet other executives, you know, and have specific conversations with them. You need to have at least one SES mentor. Okay, you're not limited to that. You can have a mentor from private industry. One of the things that I suggest, and it'll be in the slides, is that if you have an opportunity to participate in either an organization project study or a cross-organization project study, or a cross-organization council. That is building your network. That is getting you known to other parts of the organization and helping you to develop those advocates. And yes, it's more work. It's probably going to be in addition to your current duties. But guess what? That's SES, okay? Because it's not a 40-hour week. You know, it is going to be work. Okay, the last two, subject matter experts. That was always fun for me because when you start meeting people with real sky-high technical abilities in other specialties than your own, it's amazing how much you can pick up in conversation. And it's also, again, another advocate on your behalf. And human resources, one of the things I'm not getting into today is how to apply to the SES, because that's going to vary with each agency. And that's where you go to the Executive Resources Department and you find out, okay, how do we do this? Now, if you're not following executive vacancies on USA Jobs, you need to. Okay, you need to find out what kinds of positions are coming up and what are going to be the requirements that they're looking for. Most of the people that I met in here this morning, I thought were very friendly, very fluid in their conversation, but a lot of people fail in building those networks because of their communication skills. And one of the things you may want to look at is how you interact and relate to people, either as professionals or managers or executives, and how you come across. And I would say pick a couple close colleagues and get some feedback. Ask your manager, get some feedback, you know, about how you're presenting yourself. Because when you're building your network, you're going to need to do it well because you want to leave an impression in a collegial kind of way that when you are asking somebody indirectly or directly to be part of your network, there's going to need to be some reciprocity, okay, that you're not just adding a name, you know, and you're going to have to figure out the best ways for you to stay in touch with the people that you put in the network. Working together is always a great way, and that's when I was talking about the cross-agency councils or the cross-agency projects. Okay, so again, figuring out how to frame the conversation and then how you're going to actually pull it off, you know, schedule an appointment. I had a bad habit in continuing my executive network because since I had responsibility for executive learning across the agency, I needed the active support of executives in order for it to happen. And so I found that just dropping by at 10 minutes after 8 in the morning or dropping by at about 11:30, you know, I would catch a lot of people in. And they knew I wasn't stopping by just to chit chat, but I was building and maintaining my network, you know, because I would come in with some prepared interest or questions that I wanted to invite them to participate. And so you have to figure out a strategy that works for you in doing that. I get really annoyed with IDPs, you know, when people give them to me, okay? And a lot of them, ambiguous objectives, action steps, only on training, no clearly defined support, weak or no metrics, no defined deadlines, no accountability, okay? If you aren't willing to take the step, next slide, please. You know, in building your IDP, in terms of what we talked about earlier with the force field analysis and leveraging your strengths, filling in the gaps, and balancing long-term with short-term skill development needs. Now, one of the words that's missing here is knowledge, okay? Because when you are preparing for a senior level management position or executive position, you are going to need other program knowledge. Okay, it's not just a question of skills, because that's important too, equally. But you know, if you don't have the background information to work with on a project, you know, it's going to work maybe against you unless the people that are inviting you to participate on a project say, okay, we'll fill you in. Okay, but when you're building an IDP, you have two things really. It's knowledge and skills that you're going to want to be building. Thing that's hard for most people in here, stepping out of your comfort zone. okay? And you know where all those buttons are in terms of your reluctance to take on certain conversations, to meet with certain people who I can't stand her. You know, there's, there's a lot of things to think about, because sometimes you have to, I won't say take the bullet, but you have to figure out a way that you're going to communicate with the people that you need to, whether or not you get along with them, whether or not you like them, because when you become an executive, it doesn't matter. You've got to function effectively. Okay. There are some tests out there, and every agency has something a little bit different. But in terms of measuring your skill and knowledge in the ECQs, okay, Executive Core Qualifications, which is what your submission is going to be to OPM for consideration for being approved to the SES. And you come back again to the skill or knowledge gap and the force field analysis. Looking at the ECQs, you can talk with your manager or your mentor or your coach and say, okay, here's where I am. What are some of the things I need to do to bring me from here to here? Okay, and hopefully you can have that kind of honest dialogue. And frankly, your interim performance conversations are probably the best place to do it with your manager. You know, I don't know how often you have those conversations, hopefully at least semi-annual. Some people do it quarterly, but if they don't do it quarterly, it's up to you to schedule an appointment with your supervisor and say, you know what, I know it's not evaluation time, but let's talk. I'd like to know how I measure. You know, what am I doing that works for you? What doesn't work? What are some of the things I can do to improve? That, again, is maybe out of the comfort zone, and maybe the manager can't be bothered. That's that manager's problem, not yours. You're there for assistance and information. And if the manager's any good, they're going to take the time to give it to you. Okay, thanks. All right. Another note on the IDP. People love to fill IDPs with wish list training classes, okay? And they go away to the training class and they come back and they don't have an opportunity to apply it. The biggest learning occurs on the job, period, okay? The more that you can seek and attain higher level professional duties and responsibilities, the more creative you're allowed to become. You know, the more you're going to learn, okay? The next is challenging relationships. When you're building your network, like I said, don't build it with just people who like you. Build it also with people who may or may not like you or don't know you, but you know they have expertise to share with you, okay? It's, again, overcoming those personal hurdles that you may have set up to not build those relationships. But that's really important. And how often should you do it? Every day. Some part of every day, you either need to be adding somebody to your network, professional, supervisor, leadership, or meeting with somebody who's already in your network and reaffirming that relationship. And it's not just stopping by to shoot the breeze. I mean, you'd be stopping by to talk about a point of common interest, a project in progress. Okay. Formal training, that's okay. You can leave it there. Formal training is important because, again, that's going to build that knowledge base. And, you know, when you know better, you do better, right? Okay. And so there are a lot of programs out there that you can avail yourself of if the agency is willing to pay for it. I know people who pay for their own. So it's really up to you and what you need. You can look at the slide at another point. I don't want to go into the detail now, but it's really drilling down more on what we've already talked about in terms of the scope, change in diversity, relationships, persuading, teaching, making difficult decisions. They're all important. And you can't do everything at the same time. So you got to pick. You know, what is it you need most? And what is it you can do something about? Okay. when I mentioned earlier about people attend training but don't apply it. Well, one of the options that you have is when you are given the opportunity to attend professional or leadership training, when you come back, figure out ways how you can pass it on. Okay, figure out ways that you can incorporate into your daily routine and activities that indicate to you, and if not to others, that you did learn something and that you're now wanting to do better. So I would encourage you to think about that. And if you know of somebody else who went to a training program that you would have liked but didn't get to go, I'd pick their minds and say, hey, you got any handouts or anything that I might benefit from? You can also, if you attend a particular type of leadership training, you might want to come back and get permission from the supervisor to have a small group discussion, okay, where you're given the opportunity to present some of the information that you learned that you think might be of interest to them. Oh boy, okay. We've got 16 minutes left or so, right? Before we get into this, does anybody have any questions about anything that we've covered that I've made abundantly unclear? No? Okay, well, the gloves are coming off because I am going to pick on you a little bit. And I am going to ask for your participation. Are there any questions online?
Can you recommend ways to engage SES mentors in a very small organization?
Well, that is a problem because I know some organizations who only have 4, 6 SES, and to ask that small group to be a mentor for you can be difficult. One, I would still do it. I would still approach at least one, if not more, asking, if they would agree. And when we're talking about a mentor relationship, we're not talking about spending 8 hours a week, with the SES. We're talking about a monthly meeting, which could be a check-in, check-up kind of conversation. And it might only go for 6 months, because beyond that, they should just be in your sphere of influence or your list of people that you want to have in your network, okay? Because I think that you need to have almost a rotating series of mentors, because you're going to glean what there is oftentimes within that 6-month period. And, they might be sick of you by that time. It's just hard to say. So it's always good to have more than one mentor. And if you're in a small organization, I would start with those to see if I could have that relationship. And if not, then you're not limited. You can go to other agencies. You can get recommendations from OPM. There's a program in OPM has where they have a database of senior executives who are willing to mentor people in other agencies. I'm sorry I don't have that with me, but if you want to talk to Julie Brill, she's going to shoot me, but she's the lead for supervisory development for the federal service, and she could certainly refer you to that. And I think her last name is spelled B-R-I-L-L-E, first name Julie. Okay, number 1, or number 10, sorry. People who apply for executive positions and display an attitude that I'm the cat's meow, I'm it, they don't get very far other than thoroughly distancing themselves from the selection panel. And that's if they even get recommended. Now, nobody can prevent you from applying, but when they're doing the screening process, I know of specific situations where the panel said, nope, that person's not going to get interviewed. And sometimes it's, next slide, please.
I was just going to say, Julie Brill is actually online, and she said no problem.
Okay. So The opposite of that, obviously, is to consistently demonstrate supportive and inclusive leadership practices, competence, and humility. And what you bring to consideration for an executive position is all those things you are. And your reputation precedes you, okay? Because again, we're coming back to that network. Okay, next. I don't know if how many have started their ECQs? Okay, well, that's good. You know, part of the process, unless you're with an agency that does it resume-based, is to prepare 2 pages each for each executive core qualification. And that is essential, and it can also be part of your individual development, because by preparing your ECQs and your statements of accomplishment, you're going to demonstrate what you've done or what you haven't. Because a lot of times ECQs get rejected at OPM by the Qualifications Review Board because the activities listed do not demonstrate executive level performance. Okay, and you know, one of the biggies is vision. You know, have you demonstrated sufficient vision across the ECQs and your performance preparation for an executive position? So if you need to, you can have somebody. There's a lot of professional writers out there who would love to have your money. You can get assistance in preparing your ECQs, but one of the key things to remember is that the ECQs need to reflect who you are and your performance, and to do it accurately. If the writer inflates and uses keywords that maybe don't actually reflect what you've done, that's not good, and it's going to come out. When you're in the selection panel interview and they start asking some penetrating questions about some of the experiences that you've cited, if you were inaccurate or more generous than you should have been, that's going to be a problem and be cause for not getting further consideration. So do your ECQs and start looking for those skill gaps, skill and knowledge gaps that we talked about. You know, you really, you have to be at the top of the list in terms of performance, okay? And unfortunately, over the decades, I know it's gone up and down a little bit, but the average ratings have incrementally gone up. And I think at Energy last year, I think something like, might have been as high as 65% of the executives were rated 5, which is outstanding, you know, and OPM just kind of shook their heads and we need to see more documentation, you know, for some of this, you know, particularly when it comes back to the awards. And so there is an effort across federal service to lower the overall average of the ratings and to more consistently reflect that fully satisfactory performance is good. It's not just okay, it's good. But if you happen to be caught in the meltdown or the reduction in ratings, it could be a problem getting to the panel, you know, because they look at your performance rating very, very carefully. And it could be that in your narrative, and in your manager's narrative, your performance, it's going to speak to a 4 or a 5, but it could be a 3. And I would just say you need to be aware of that. And when performance time comes around, or even before that, you should be talking to your manager about, well, where do I stand? And what do I need to do to raise it to the next level? One other thing that I'll mention is be careful about being voluntold for volunteer efforts, like who does the combined federal campaign, who does raising bringing in food for people. I think these are all important, and I've always been a contributor to the combined federal campaign. But when you get assigned projects that are very time-consuming, away from your normal duties, you got to figure out how you're going to straddle both, okay, so that your performance doesn't suffer. Because they look at everything, and when it comes time for the performance appraisal, it's the bottom line and what were your results. Okay, so yes, I want you to participate in those kinds of activities, just judiciously. I've already talked about this, and a lot of people are very uncomfortable with strengthening their networking skills. You have to meet people. There's just no way around it. You have to build that base of people who are going to support your interests and efforts for any kind of promotion. Okay, in terms of getting to a senior level position before SES, people talk, and selecting officials ask, is John, is Mike, Susan, who's the best candidate? Because they don't work with you day in, day out. Chances are people in your network do, okay? And so there will be questions. And like I said, once a day, you should take some affirmative step to build your network, period. Next. Okay. This is really important. And, when we were talking about vision and breadth of experience, if you are in a very narrow focused position, that will work against you in applying for an executive position, unless it's a senior leader, senior technical, which are in highly specialized areas, and you cannot spend more than 25% of your time supervising others. So this is more for scientists and senior engineers and that kind of thing. But assignments that you can get either across your current organization or across the agency or outside of the agency will all contribute to that breadth of experience. And as I mentioned earlier, you may need the lateral. Sometimes you have to go this way to go up. I know people who have gone this way, down one, and then back up again to get the kind of experience they needed to qualify for the position that they wanted. Okay, next. Okay. It's amazing what people bring to the interview process. I've had the good fortune to meet with hundreds of people who wanted to become SES. And so I would always do a little mini interview. I'd look at their resume. If they had ECQs, I'd look at those. And then I would ask them some questions that I would anticipate they would get asked. And it was clear that more than a few weren't practiced and basically were flummoxed, and with some of the questions, which were not that difficult, but they just hadn't expected it. So if you are challenged in interview situations, get some colleagues that you trust to practice with you. There's a couple, and also, the conversations that you have with your supervisor and with other executives when you're building a network, that's also like a mini interview where you are practicing presenting your interests and needs and how they might be able to help you. Okay. It's getting tougher now. Since 1995 and integration of technology in the federal government, increasingly executives are becoming more technically proficient because they have to be. And it's not just with computers, but it's also technically proficient in the field that they're working in. And if you don't have it, it's going to show up both in your resume and in the interview. And so if you do not have the depth and breadth of experience that's needed for the position, you're just filling out the panel, okay? And so you need to evaluate senior positions, be it senior level manager or executive, to see what the requirements are and to see what they're looking for and how do you match up. What is the skill gap? What is the knowledge gap? Okay. next. Okay. Well, we're getting closer, and there is a big difference in leadership skills that people bring to the table, and there's a big difference in leading an organization and in managing an organization. And that's what separates a lot of senior level managers from executives, in being able to have the vision and the breadth to lead the organization either through a major change, which, by the way, happens every 6 months in most agencies, or in a new program direction. And when you are being interviewed and considered by the panel, they're going to be looking for that. But like I said earlier, your reputation and performance appraisals precede you. So they know something about you when you get interviewed. And, if you feel like you're not in the same ballpark, but they're still going to interview, I'd do it, just to get the experience. But go in eyes open that you may not be the best candidate. You think if you got this far that this would not be an issue. But in January 2014, when I had the leadership development seminar and I had 5 executives on stage talking about why people didn't get picked for SES positions, when they talked about the interview, they were shocked sometimes when people came in and they really weren't prepared, that they didn't necessarily dress to fit the role. Okay, they had a different kind of attitude. The interest was there, but not as strong as they wanted. I mean, there's all these different reasons, and evasive answers. And so you could have made the top 5, you could have been interviewed, but if you bombed the interview, you're not going to get picked. I mean, that's, just, again, the long and short of it. And the last and most common reason is that, remember we talked about there's only 7,200 career service positions, and there's thousands of people who could be eligible to apply for it. Eventually, maybe only 100 or 200 or 300 apply. But, when you make to the top 5 or the top 3, the selecting official is going to handpick the one that he or she thinks is going to be the best for the job. And there's nothing you can do about that. Okay, you can put up a great front, a great effort, a great application, but if there's not that connection in the selection process, you may get passed. But you've learned, you have takeaways from that process, and I hope that you're going to be able to apply it and come back again, because that's how it happens. And
Does anyone in the room have questions?
So in reference to this one on the screen, where it says the selection panel does not believe you're ready, is there like any follow-up behind that, like tip? That's probably asking too much, but is there any like feedback as to why you weren't ready for this particular one? Can you ask for that, or?
It varies by agency, and unfortunately, the trickle down, from the panel is, I won't say hit or miss, but it's not as often as we would like. I think you would be served well by getting in touch with people who were on the panel, and if they'll talk with you, just to get some feedback, if there is any. And again, sometimes there's not, that you were really a great candidate, but they just preferred the other one. Now, if you don't make it to the interview, then there should be more feedback available as to, well, why wasn't my information or my resume up to snuff? What was missing? Yes.
Over the years, there have been some conversations on making changes to the SES program process. And I was wondering, what are your thoughts with the current administration, where this program is going?
Whether or not there's going to be support for more executive positions. I think right now, it varies by agency and the funding that they're getting, and like DHS, they're getting money hand over fist. Energy's getting money hand over fist. But whether they apply that money to executive development is another question. And as I mentioned earlier, and I don't think I gave you all the specifics, but with an SES CDP, if you have an opportunity to apply for it, do so, even if it's with another agency, because just going through the process is going to strengthen you. And if you are selected and your agency is willing to fund your participation, I had a Chico years ago say, this is like polishing the apple, because if you get selected to the CDP, that means you were one of the best of the people who applied. And so now you're going to have an opportunity to receive training and feedback that will enhance your candidacy. But having said that, less than 20% of the SES positions are filled by CDP graduates. Okay, so that means 80% of the positions are still very open for competition. Yes, sir, Keith. Well, it's not just the work. The question was, what are some of the reasons that SES is not for everyone? And one, not everyone has the same leadership ability. And sometimes they know it, sometimes they don't. And it's been my experience in the agencies that I've been involved with that it's not a question of work ethic per se, but it's a question of the demands of the job. And if you don't get the work done, you are an employee at will as an executive, and you can be dismissed or reassigned at the agency's pleasure. So that's just something to keep in mind as you do it. And unless you've had the preparatory leadership experience leading to an SES appointment, it is a tough road, because there are things that you will pick up along the way in managing a first-line organization and managing a multi-level organization. And that's what happens most of the time with SES positions. It's not limited to a small group of people, and so there are challenges that you have to be prepared for.
Is there a specific quota for SESs or a specific number that agencies are allowed to have?
Well, as Julie Brewer will tell you, OPM authorizes the allocation, but that doesn't mean that they fill them all. DOE had, I think, 500 allocations for SES positions, but they currently only have about 440 senior executives. And so that's going to vary year to year and in budgets and allocations. Okay. Anything else? Yes, sir.
What would you say your time period is from, start to finish that you would say?
In terms of being selected or preparing?
You can include preparation as well, but I was really looking at selected.
Well, the selection process, again, is going to vary by agency, but there's been a push to reduce the time periods required from job announcement through placement. And 4 months is not unreasonable. I've seen some go 5, 6, 7 months. It just all depends on the situation. In terms of preparation, that's an individual consideration, and I don't think there's any magic to 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, because people are selected into the SES with widely varying degrees of experience in different areas. And I would say at least 5 to 7 years experience in leadership, responsible leadership positions at a minimum. Any questions from online?
We had one question about whether or not it's advantageous to have experience in the private sector and mix that with government experience for getting an SES position.
Private sector experience is very definitely applicable, and in fact, energy probably selects maybe 10% of their executives from private industry. So very definitely. Is that it?
Thank you.
Okay, well, listen, we're going to wrap up. I'm glad to stay here for a little while. If people want to come up afterwards and ask any additional questions, I consider it an honor to have been here with you today, and I appreciate your time and your interest, and I wish you the very best in making your career decisions about whether or not to go into the senior executive service. Thank you.